Let me preface everything by saying I hate Bronya. My first exposure to her was during my brief periods of playing Honkai Impact. It was around 60 days, to be precise. Among the trio of starter Pokemon in Honkai Impact, we got Kiana, Mei, and Bronya. Bronya was always the character that kind of made me cringe. Her whole entire shtick just did not interest me. Don't get me wrong, there are several themes in their corresponding games that ties back to the Matryoshka, aka Kokolia, aka Mother, aka the one that must be followed and eventually betrayed, so Bronya can become an independent bitch. I got you. But something about child Bronya turned me the frick off. I couldn't stand her constant hive mind mentality towards Kokolia. Her deadpan personality, while usually unoffensive to me, was irksome for some reason. And then probably I just didn't like how childish she looked. It's a twin pigtails, man. I don't know. So it should come as a surprise that Silver Wolf, a surprise especially to me that Silver Wolf, a child variation or a teenage variation of Bronya, was the Bronya that actually won me over. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. It's your Slime King, the Geo Man, and welcome to another video. Let's divide these videos into three sections for what I think are the three variations of Bronya we have had so far. But admittedly, I am not as invested in Bronya's story as I am for Kiana's or Mei's, so Google will fill in the blanks for me in this video. I told you I did not like Bronya, and I can only attest to what I have personally experienced of her. But all the more, it makes that much more impactful that Silver Wolf made me actually like a Bronya. So, the three variations I'd like to talk about are Child Bronya, Adult Bronya, and Silver Wolf. As a disclaimer to start off everything, by the way, this is in no way, shape, or form meant to be taken as a holistic approach into Bronya's characters or designs. This is wholly based on my opinion and my varying levels of exposure and perspectives on her and her iterations. Now, if you don't agree with anything I said, if anything I said was false, whether due to my lack of information or personal bias, please feel free to comment it down below. I want to be informed, and I want to be corrected. Okay. There are many variations of Child Bronya and her various battle suits that have come from across the years. Each battle suit represents a different time in their lives, a different perspective. You know, the Honkai Impact lore. Occasionally, there are battle suits that are from a different universe, or what people like to call as the Captain Verse or something. Look, I told you Google will have to fill in some blanks for me, and this is where Google fills in the blanks. So, the Captain Verse is basically the multiverse, alternate universes, a series of alternate universes, which means that there are Bronyas out there that have totally different attitudes and different personalities. Now, these kinds of Bronyas usually take place in limited time events inside of Honkai Impact. And it is at this point that I would like to point out that my only exposure to the child form of Bronya is the canon Bronya in the main story of Honkai Impact 3rd. And the last thing I remember about Bronya in that story is her becoming the Herrscher of Reason in the Sea of Quanta. And that is enough exposure for me to know if I like her or not. And as such, this is the part where I will say she just did not resonate with me with the things or the knowledge I have of her. As I said in the intro, I hate these characters that start out as a slave to their quote-unquote mother, a secret sleeper agent that betrays her friends, and then eventually she gains the courage to break free from the chains of the past because of her friends and Sealy or whatever. I know, Kokolia is actually just secretly good too, but to be honest, I see all that as a stereotypical and just flat out bad storytelling. Bronya's arc to becoming independent is kind of bland. Kokolia actually just wanting the best for her daughters, despite her obviously malicious and wrong ways of doing things, try to make you feel like she's supposed to be a waifu that you should forgive, and that you should feel sorry for her and you want to simp for her. That's a symptom of Hoyoverse's bad story writing, and Bronya is its casualty. I already didn't like how child Bronya looked, and her monotonous responses and attitude in the story weren't helping either. In fact, the only thing I liked about Bronya in this timeline was her interactions with Seely. That's because I like Seely. She's cute, and sometimes it's that simple. I like a character because she's cute. I don't like Bronya because she looks too much like a child. Waifus typically are loved because of their appearances first, and Bronya's first impression to me left something to be desired, and I think that's where I actually struggled to give her a chance the most. Now, before we get into adult Bronya territory, I would like to talk about Hacksaw Bunny, since I did use her with my Ice team with Alicia before I stopped playing Honkai Impact III, so I was exposed to her, right? I started playing in late 2022, and based on a few quick Google searches, the Hacksaw Bunny event happened during 2021. So I don't know why this variation of Bronya existed in the first place, nor did I know that she was an alternate version of herself in the Captain verse. In fact, I literally just Googled it and I literally just found about it today. Anyway, I would technically put her in the same tier as Silverwolf, but since this video mainly focuses on Silverwolf, despite not me talking about her at all up to this point, I decided to put Hacksaw Bunny here just to note that what if? Based on the wiki, Hacksaw Bunny is very similar to Silverwolf, a hacker in a rebellious phase and just wants to have fun. Perhaps if I played the Hacksaw Bunny event when it came out, it would have changed the entire timeline of what I think of Bronya and the Bronya verse as a whole. And this video would not have existed. But Honkai's oversaturation of content is just one cog in the many problems it presents to newer players. But that's neither here nor there. So, let's move on. The only experience I have with adult Bronya and Honkai Impact III can basically be summed up to nothing. I've never encountered Silverwing in that game, primarily because in order to interact and play her, I need to have finished APHO or a post-Honkai Odyssey, Chapter 1 and then get to Chapter 2, where I presume she appears and you can play her. Look, I told you there's oversaturation of content. And then there's the fact that she was also not my preferred Ice DPS, as I already pulled for Herrscher Alicia. So anytime she was on banner at the time, I was just disincentivized. So all I saw from her was how beautiful she was compared to Child Bronya, and how it fixes a lot of the things appearance-wise that I disliked from the child form of Bronya. That leads me to Belobog Bronya in Honkai Star Rail. This one I had actual experiences with, and I have a couple of things to say about this bitch. She was front and center in the Belobog storyline, and once again, she fell victim to Hoyoverse's horrid pacing. I mean, at this point, every character they've introduced to us has been butchered one way or another. So, before I go into Googling what the hell Silverwing did or was like to fill in the blanks and the what ifs, I think it's better for me to provide you my thoughts on Belobog Bronya first, as my first entry into the adult industry of the Bronyaverse. Of course, I was excited as all hell. This was the first Bronya that should have been what Child Bronya was from the start. The prototypical waifu you simp for. As she shed her twin pigtails and took on a mature form, I was sure, finally, that I would like a Bronya. But I didn't. My first look at Belobog Bronya as she was first introduced in the story was frickin' awesome. For all but 5 goddamn seconds though. Because then we enter the next scene, only to be greeted by a rather familiar face. Yeah, you know it. It's Kokolia. And essentially I knew right then and there that this Bronya was just like every other Bronya I knew. And we're at this old rodeo once again. Story was going to be exactly the same as it was in Honkai Impact the Third, and that same obsession with following her mother like the Russian assassin that she was ever present. Now, there are plenty of pacing issues in Belobog's story, but what I couldn't get over was this particular scene at the orphanage in Rivet Town. Now, I'm warning you, I'm about to say some light spoilers about Belobog's story, so if you haven't gone through Belobog's story, you have been warned. It was during Bronya's visit to the orphanage in Rivet Town in the underworld, and how suddenly she just remembers everything. Who she was, why she was who she was, and that she was childhood friends with Seely. And suddenly, as if it was fate, as if it was destiny, they suddenly become BFFs. I know that's the power of anime friendship. In concept, this was fine for me. I enjoyed Fairy Tail because it was self-aware in what it was. Honkai Star Rail, though, tries too hard with its main story, and its execution of it, I can't help but just visibly cringe. It felt rushed. We barely spent any time in Rivet Town. Barely anything to make us attached to Bronya, to Seely, to the people of the underworld. This was a classic Hoyoverse trope. They banked on the fact that you already knew who Bronya and Seely were, and so they can just ignore pacing altogether. Heck, they do this to Genshin, even if we don't have prior connections or prior backstory knowledge to the characters at all. The entire arc of Bronya from that point couldn't reach its full potential anymore, and thus never having the intended impact it could have had. And just one simple pep talk from Seely changed Bronya's mind of never questioning Kokoya's orders. I get it, man. You get exposed to an entirely new world you never knew existed. That is quite a shock. However, the thing is, Bronya's resolve has to be put in question here. If she really was strong-willed and resolute in her ways, it wouldn't have just changed so easily, like a tantruming teenager unable to control her raging hormones. It's as if we were flipping coins and her emotions were based solely on it being heads or tails. That is what I felt. Because the emotions never really felt like it had the time to actually seep in. Instead, it was merely a magic act. Suddenly, the rabbit that was supposed to be there turned into a pigeon with a quick sleight of hand. And that was the final straw. The straw that broke the camel's back. Belobog Bronya was not the Bronya that would win me over. But what if I actually played Silverwing's story? Or played her in general? Because to me, she is the best looking Bronya out of the bunch. So would it have increased my liking, my inclination to the Bronyaverse? Since she is heavily linked to Chapter 2 of APHO, perhaps there was a change in her personality from the latter parts of the main story in Honkai Impact the Third that I would have found her more endearing. But unlike Hoyoverse's pacing and writing, I don't change my mind that easily. It would take a drastic shift in Silverwing's demeanor and attitude because technically, I will still associate her with Bronya from the start, mainly because she's just a grown-up version of it. And that is the problem. You have to make me erase the very humble and terrible beginnings of my introduction to child Bronya. Not even an adult version, merely an adult version, can dissuade me from saying that Bronya just does not resonate with me. Okay, let's all just take a deep breath. We're almost there, because we've finally gotten to the most recent addition to the Bronyaverse, and the very topic of this video. You already know Silverwolf won me over, but what exactly about her made me think that she was superior to all the other Bronyas that came before her? Well, I talked briefly about it with Haxor Bunny, but to put it succinctly for now, it's part personality, being in a rebellious-esque, spontaneity that just breeds chaos everywhere she goes. And despite being a child Bronya who has child Bronya looks, you can quote me from this video that I hate child Bronya looks, but the latter half of the reason why I love Silver Wolf is actually just her appearance. And that's not all. There are actually 3 things that really make Silver Wolf stand out to me. Number 1 is, as I said, her appearance. Number 2 is her perspective. And number 3 is her demeanor. Wait. Did I really just say that I liked Silver Wolf's appearance? Why, yes. I like a child Bronya's looks. Yes, I do. There's one thing that Silver Wolf does well, or better than her co-peers in the Bronyaverse, and it's the ponytail supremacy. She gets rid of the twin pigtails, and despite being a child or teen, she looks more mature, and her overall aesthetic just feels better to look at. Starting from her cute tie to her cropped leather vest and hemmed short shorts. She embodies that aesthetic, and despite me not liking the punk look as much, its combination with the gaming chic makes this one pretty nice. And then you compare her to the competition in the Bronyaverse. We start with Bellabog Bronya's outfit, which is way overdone in comparison. Child Bronyas across any timeline were all just really bland, except for the Hersher variations. Though, the best looking ones is Silverwings, as I mentioned before, but in terms of personality and because of my ignorance of her personality, she doesn't quite stack up to the complete package that is Silver Wolf. Moving on to the second reason why Silver Wolf stands out is her perspective. Or her perspective in life, to be exact. Her perspective I can probably link the most to her backstory, and some reading on her character stories a little bit. She was basically an orphan. A story very similar to all Bronyas, I'm sure. She grew up in a basement turned arcade hall, and above that was a restaurant. She recorded the highest scores in each of the arcades because she had nothing else. She had no one else. And once she was done, those became the days that the game called Basement ended, and she was forced to move on to maybe greener pastures. This is what became her perspective in life, that life is merely a game that you try to get the highest score on and move on to the next one, as a byproduct of her environment as a kid. But at the same time, it actually goes to show that it's that she has ambition to never be satisfied, as if she was always looking for something to perhaps complete herself. You know, she never had a legal name, nor any friends. She only had the games. And because of this, she became a loner, going as far as fabricating virtual friends to help her with potential jobs. She was basically a NEET, a badass hacker NEET, and I'm all for it. Ultimately though, through various trials and tribulations, she finally conquered her homeworld of Punk Lord, and whenever she finishes a game, she would always go back to the rooftops of the first game she conquered, that basement filled with arcades. And as she looked up at the sky from where it all started, finally conquering, ending the game called Punk Lord, her eyes filled with longing as if something was missing. And then she mutters, "So boring." The sky she stared at showed the stars and the vastness that her ambition could take her to. Being confined on Punk Lord was like being a caged bird, unable to fly into the sky. It's that perspective she shows with her each breath and action in game that slowly won me over. Finally, the third reason why Silver Wolf stands out is her demeanor. And it is something I can relate with wholeheartedly. There's a certain level of chaos she brings to every situation. While her intentions aren't purely stemmed from creating chaos for just the sake of it, it makes it better because then it becomes a sort of controlled chaos in order to achieve her goals, which is most of the time winning in a game or something. In the mission Punk Lord mentality, she shows great hubris, by challenging Skrillium and Herta. Despite the odds not technically favoring her, she goes ahead and hacks the simulated universe anyway. Even if it was a trap, even if she knew it was a trap, there has to be a certain confidence as a genius, and you have to take pride in that. And she cannot run away from that, and she did not run away from that. But at the same time, despite being this genius, as she loses all her funds by the end of the mission, she throws a great tantrum as noted by Kafka in the ending scene of that mission, which is a contrast to how seemingly calm and collected she is under pressure against many obstacles. But from time to time, she shows moments of weakness that serve to show a level of fragility that brings you a little bit closer to her. And let's not forget her mentality when it comes to life in it of itself. The times I saw her in the Express and the times she would text me on her phone all can be basically summed up by gotcha. She, aside from being a hacker, works part-time as the personification of Gamba on the side. And to be honest, while I don't personally advocate spending money on pulls, I just pull whenever I have any jades, primos, or whatever you call them. And this message from her basically sums up my thoughts on pulling as a whole. It was that message that I received randomly one day and was sent over at my Discord, the Slime Kingdom, multiple times, people tagging me over it. Perhaps it was that realization as well that there was such a stark contrast, a dissonance between the Bronya that I've come to associate with and what Silver Wolf was texting and doing with me, was showing me. Perhaps if I had experienced Haxor's Bunny's story or Silver Wing's story, I would have been in Bronya much, much sooner. But those are what ifs. There was only one thing I was sure of right there and there. That it was at that moment when I received that text, that was the moment I fully resonated with the Bronya. I was finally hooked on the Bronya-verse. Obviously, this video is not a complete deep dive into the Bronya-verse. This video basically just sums up my unexpected experiences liking a Bronya. The thing that I wanted to highlight last is that first impressions are everything. Honkai Impact the Third story at the start was truly grotesque for this, and that carried my impression of Bronya to this day. It took a Silver Wing in Honkai Star Rail for me to finally get over that stigma. Because to be honest, the day I liked Silver Wolf, I pulled Silver Wolf. Then suddenly, all of the other Bronyas kind of look more appealing. It's like there's some sort of reverse cheerleader effect going on, that Silver Wolf is the hot chick that suddenly makes every other Bronya around her seem hotter, but Silver Wolf is still the hottest chick. You know? I don't know if that makes sense. Anyway, one last thing. Feel free to disagree with any of my sentiments with other Bronyas in this video, as it's pretty obvious that I did not spend as much time with other Bronyas as I did with Silver Wolf. However, as I said, first impressions kinda matter. If it takes me 30 hours worth of content, redemption arcs, segs arcs to like a Bronya, then you have to question at that point, is that character really likable if you only felt like you liked them after 30 hours? Well, of course, because at that point you already like the character. But all I'm saying is I'd rather just like the character that I already like from the start, rather than have to put in effort to possibly like a character if I learn more about them. You feel me? Anyway, I appreciate it if you ever got to this point in the video. And since you're here, might as well like the video, so like the video, bitches. This is our parting. Farewell. Slime King. Twitch. Discord. Celebratory Jackie.